Sicha we will be learning today is in Likkutei Sichos Chelik Chof Beis, the first Sicha. And it talks about the posik that speaks in Parshas Behar about the inyan of a Shof Sahar Shabbos Lashem and of Shemitah. If in posik v'Shof Sahar Shabbos Lashem and the posik where it speaks about Shemitah, the Torah says v'Shof Sahar Shabbos Lashem, that let the land rest, a resting for Hashem. And that's the year of Shemitah. The seventh year, there's a cycle of 7. And the seventh year of Shemitah, you're not allowed to work on the field. The field has to rest. And then it starts over again, and the seventh again. And then after you have 7 cycles, you have 49 years. So the 50th year is Yovel. So on the posik, V'shof sar Shabbos Lashem, as B'shon Hashvi is dar the air druin, that on the 7th year, the earth has to rest. And you're not allowed to work in the field or in the vineyard, etc., etc. Bring the Zayah and Posik. So the Zayah brings the Posik, Isikna Eved Ivri. If you will buy, it's a Posik in Mishpatim. If you will buy a Jewish slave, so the din is Sheishonim Yavet, he should work for 6 years. And the Posik continues, and on the 7th year, he goes out free. So this Zayah, concerning the mitzvah of Shemitah, that the earth has to rest. So he quotes the posik where it says, if you buy an Eved Ivri, he should work for 6 years. And then he continues and he says like this: the Kol Bal Yisrael, for every Yid, Isle Naiche b'Shmitah, there is a resting in Shemitah. Bahu Naiche da'are, because this resting, that the land has to rest, Itzrichu Avde Naiche. The Avodim also get their rest. In dem Ruhen von der darf nicht the Knecht, that when there's the rest of the land, the earth, so the avodim, the servants, the slaves really also have to rest. Or begin kach, and therefore Bashvi is therefore it quotes the end of the pasuk that Bashvi is Yetzel Achof Shechinon, that it says by a Neved on the 7th year he goes out free. Is connected to this that on the 7th year is Shemitah and the earth rests. So Neved also gets his rest, which means he gets his freedom on the 7th year, the same year that the earth rests. The pashta is that simply it seems the Zayah learned the pshat in Bashvi Yetzel Achav Shechinam, that the Zayah learns the pshat in the pasuk where it says by the Eved that on the 7th year he goes out free. Doesn't mean the 7th year from when he became a slave, nor Shnas HaShmit. It's talking about the 7th year of the cycle, which is called the year of Shemitah. We know the question, the wonder that this seems very, very strange. It's a clear halacha, written in many, many places by the Chachomim. As an Eved, a Jewish slave who sells himself or is sold as a slave, goes out free, not in that year that's called the year of Shemitah, the 7th year of the cycle, nor the 7th year of his own, from when he was sold. So how does the Zayar say that in the same resting of the field, the Eved gets rest, which means to say that the same year which is Shemitah, when the field is supposed to rest, that's the year the Eved goes out. It's not, it doesn't make sense to say as the Zayar is mechulik mit the alam amor chazal benig the Zayar pashad argus, because other people would say in the Chanama the Zayar is a derech of pnimis atayr, it's not a derech of halacha, so could argue with the halachas that's in the Gemara and Chazal. But in this case, it doesn't seem so. And Bechal, the Rebbe didn't like to say that there's a machlekes, even though some learn like that. Sometimes there's an argument between the Zayar, between Kabbalah and halacha. The Rebbe even explains it because Zayar, Nigla and Pnister is called, Nigla is called Gufa deraisa, the body of the Torah, and Kabbalah Zayar is called Nishmosa deraisa, the neshama of the Torah. And it's hard to say that the neshama and the body and the guf argue. They don't fit together. So usually they have to fit together. So here it's strange. It doesn't fit. And the Zayar says he goes out in the Shemitah. And the Poshup Pshat in Halacha, which is many, many places in Chazal, that he goes out in the 7th year from when he was sold, whether it's a year of Shemitah or not. We'll understand this by first bringing in that we find concerning the mitzvahs, as a Sefran Akim, a mitzvah neifen for the Chatchila, Sefran Akim, a mitzvah blazing neifen for the Eved. Sometimes you could do a mitzvah in a form of the Chatchila. That's how you should do it. It's the best way to do it. And sometimes you're able to do the mitzvah in the form of b'di'evet. If it's done that way, it's also good. But that's not called the Chatchila. Now, usually we find this by a din derabbanon. The Rabbanan made a din, so they only made it. That's the way you should do it. That's the best way to do it. But b'diavad, if you miss something that they said, is also good. But the Rebbe says here, it says in Achreinim, the Lekad of Yosef Engel Baruch says, as a der chilik from the chatchila b'diavad is faran afilu b'inyan deraisa. That this difference between doing something l'chatchila and sometimes you're also yetzer b'diavad, we find even by din deraisa. And he brings many rayas to this, that we find even by din deraisa, the Torah says to do something. Sometimes that's l'chatchila, the right way to do it. But b'diavad, if you skipped a certain detail that the Torah says, you're also yetzer. Well, Nochmer goes even further. Nit nor benegir says elcha protim for the mitzvahs on a blaze at night's dodi. This is not only said concerning such details, which is a side condition. Was then will kammer verstehen. Then, if that would be the case, it's only by something that's not an essential thing in the mitzvah. Kammer verstehen, you could understand as I feel of when it's felt out there. Now you have to make given the mitzvah upon the b'diavad. Since it's a side, it's not the essence of the mitzvah. So it makes sense that certain conditions, it's right to do it, but if you missed it, it's also good b'diavad. Nor is on the Faran goes further. There are cases, but their prat is in Guf in the mitzvah, that the detail that we're talking about is a part in the mitzvah itself. And still it's possible that it's not a condition that if you're missing it, you're not mekayim the mitzvah. You miss mekayim the mitzvah b'diavad, and you fulfill the mitzvah b'diavad even without that detail. Well, you bring the roof kama v'kama digmois. There are many examples given. Vavu, the kula means the main one. The literal translation means the father of them all. I mean, the main one where we see in the Gemara clearly that even by a deraisa that's possible to happen is the cloud by yoni kochim, by things that have to do with korbanos, with kochim. There's a lashon shina kosav olav lakiv. That sometimes the Gemara says the Torah repeats a certain din by kochim to teach you that din that the Torah repeated, something that must be, and if you're missing it, you're not yetzer. In other words, if the Torah, certain details of Torah doesn't repeat, it's not ma'akiv. Not ma'akiv means that you should do it, l'chatchila, but b'diavad, the Torah itself says, b'diavad, if you missed it, it's also good. So we see that even by the Raisa, there is a difference between l'chatchila and b'diavad. L'idem klal, v'alnech varentot veren kama v'kama yonim t'moyim. Go on this rule. This will answer many strange things. But some of them will be brought here and explained. An example to this from something that's part of this season, this time of the year. We have a certain mitzvah that we'll see there, this concept, that the mitzvah was given, that the chatchila you have to do it one way, b'di'evet. If you didn't do it that way, it's still good. And the way the Rebbe will explain, it's not only that if you missed out something on your own, but even the mitzvah itself was given that sometimes the only way the mitzvah is done is only in the b'di'evet way. And we'll see it. The example is from Sfira Saimer, counting the Eimer. Sfira Saimer sagt, the Posek is Fartam Lachem Mochtas HaShabbos. The Posek says you shall start counting from the day after Shabbos. Was meint the Pashtas Yom HaShabbos. If you learn simple translation, that means the day after Shabbos, which is Sunday. With the Tzdukim or the Baisusim, the Tzdukim, Baisusim, different groups, they claimed, as I said, as Shabbos, that you have to start counting Sfira always on a Sunday. So Shavuos will always come on a Sunday. I'm going to say on Sfira from the Mochrat Yom HaShabbos, because start counting the day after Shabbos. So that's how you would learn a simple pshat in the Posik. But the Chachamim, the oral Torah explain, as Memochras HaShabbos meant Memochras Yontiv. The day after Shabbos doesn't mean the day after Shabbos Sunday, but it means the day after Yontiv. The Chazal bring the Chachamim bring many rayas, and it means the day after Yontiv, which is actually what we do. The day after Yontiv means the second day of Pesach. Now we have 2 days of Pesach in Chutz Loretz. So the second day is also Yontiv, but originally it was only Be'etzem and Eretz Yisrael. Now also there's only 1 day of Yontiv, and then starts the day after Yontiv. So the second day, that's when we start counting. And when the Torah says count the day after Shabbos, means after Yontiv. It's not understood. The Pesach, since Torah wants us to start counting the day after Yontif, after Pesach, which is the second day of Pesach. So why does the Torah use the word the day after Shabbos? Which gives us a place to make a mistake. Why doesn't say the day after Pesach? But the Rebbe in Order 13 says, now sometimes if it would say the day after Pesach, you could make a different mistake, because Pesach could go on the Korban Pesach. Korban Pesach is brought out of Pesach, so maybe it would mean the first day of Pesach. That's why you couldn't say Mochas HaPesach. So the Rebbe says, but so it shouldn't say the day after Pesach. Could have had the day after Yontiv. something like that. But not Mimochas HaShabbos, which means the day after Shabbos. And it's interesting, the Rebbe doesn't say this, what I'm going to say now, but it's interesting. Sometimes the Torah uses a word which is not the exact word you should use, because if the Torah would want to tell us clearly, it would have to go more at length. There had to be many words. So the Torah would choose to write one word instead of 10 words to make it kitzer. But in this case, it's not so. Mochas HaShabbos, the same words as Mochas HaPesach, the same amount of letters. Hey, Pei, Samach Ches, and Hey, Shin, Beisov. And Mochas HaChag would be even letter. 3 less letters. Hey, Ches, Gimel. And here it's Hey, Shin, Beisov. So it's not because of that. So there must be a reason why the Torah writes Mochas HaShabbos, which simply means Shabbos, and it doesn't mean it. It means really the day after Pesach, and it doesn't write it clearly. Based on the rule that the Rebbe said before, that sometimes there's mitzvahs which are given lechatchila and also b'diavad, we could explain it. Ubahagden, by first explaining something else. Explaining the thing, what I explained before. Just like we said before, there is a possibility of mitzvahs that you could do it lechatchila b'diavad mitzvah the person. Usually we say when you do it b'diavad it means that you miss something. It was up to you, and you should have done it, and you didn't do it. Nevertheless, it's good b'diavad. Al derech zeh, but that's not the only case. Is do amol achilik mitzad mitzvah. Sometimes in the mitzvah itself, the way it was given, as in gevitza matzovim is the mitzvah mitmer shleim, is that in certain situations the mitzvah is more complete. Und is do amatzah, but the mitzvah chatchilu is geschelt naneven, as in dem matzav tut man the mitzvah nit b'shleimus. And the same mitzvah is made up so by Hashem that sometimes the situation is that you cannot do it in the full shleimus of the mitzvah. As found by Enike Protem, some details are missing, and nevertheless, that's the way they wanted you to do the mitzvah in that situation. For the digmois achip shut is the simple, one of the simplest examples. When we had a Bisamigdosh, Yontev was connected to bring a korbanos. Sai korbanos sibur shel yochid, chot sibur amin. You have korbanos at the community, communal korbanos, like the korban musaf of Yontev. That's part of the korbanos of Yontev that makes up the Yontev of sibur. Ushal yochid comes to Yontev that the individual has to bring korbanos eilas riyah, which is korban eila for coming to the Beis Hamikdash, shalmach kigeh and shlomim shalmach kigeh. These are korbanos that every yid who would go up to Yerushalayim for Yontev, and there is a din of aliyah l'regel, you have to go up to Yerushalayim, would have to bring these korbanos. So that was only done when the other Beis Hamikdash. Mishachar Beis Hamikdash, the Hamikdash destroyed the Yontev in the Torah. We still have the Yontev, or any of the Yontev. We have a deraisa dik din Yontev, but on the korbanos, and without the korbanos, risking the korbanos. Same thing, even the time at the Beis Hamikdash is mishein lekarka. For instance, somebody who doesn't have a land in the Tzorol, the dinis is potef na aliyah regel, so he is exempt from going up to Yerushalayim. He's exempt from bringing those karbonas that every individual would bring in the Beis Hamikdash when he went to Yerushalayim. Even though he has the yontif in the Raisa. So we see the yontif could be done more b'shleimus with karbonas, and if a case where the Torah says don't bring karbonas, like because we don't have a Mikdash, the yontif is shleimus. Now, you might say it's not a good example. You might think because the karbonas on yontif is a side matter. We're talking about the mitzvah itself. The Torah gave it in a situation that it's not going to be done with complete shleimus. You would think in this case it's not the same, because here it's only a prat. The yontif is a yontif anyway. And this is a detail. So the Rebbe says, no, okay, movement's understood. We understand that the karbonas of yontif. And similar, the fact that you had to go up to Yerushalayim for yontif, it's not a side matter. It's a very important part in the yontif. The Yisayim Mazayah Shleimer, you could go even a step further. The karbonas is anita masuva for yontif. The karbonas is not a result of yontif. In other words, there is a yontif. There's certain things you do on the yontif. Like in Kiddush yontif, you bring karbonas a yontif. It's part of the yontif itself. Certainly part of the complete level of yontif. So the way yontif is, there's part of what yontif is, not something that you have to do on yontif. Part of what yontif is bringing karbonas, certain karbonas. Still, man, says a matzav and meken al pitated bring in a situation when you cannot bring the karbonas, not because you decide that you don't want to bring the karbonas. The Torah says don't bring the karbonas. Is do yontev v'kedushas yontev chulam in atayra. So you have yontev and the Kedusha of Yontif Midaraisa. So we see here there are two, the way Yontif was given is two levels. There's a way it's Bishlemus, we call that Lachatchila, with the Karbon and everything. And the same is B'diavad, in other words, there's a situation, Minat Torah, from the Torah given, that when you're missing certain part of Yontif, it's not as good as that, but it's still you have the mitzvah of Yontif. Noch mehr gefindt man, we find even more, as es eine Frau Mitzvah, so eine Lechatchila gegeben worden naiv, und als eine Frau der Mitzvah zwei Zmanim. We find also a mitzvah, that the mitzvah was given lechatchila, that there are two parts of the mitzvah. They're both same mitzvah. One part has the shleimus of the mitzvah, one part not. What is it? In names man is sefaram b'shleimus b'chol haprotim. The mitzvah was given in such a way that certain time the mitzvah is complete with all the details. And in another time the same mitzvah is there and it's not complete. Ledogma, for instance, Yontev chelameid shalei. Yontev and chelameid. Chelameid is al teil for Yontev. Chelameid is part of Yontev. It is b'chlal for meyadim the simcha. It's part of the mitzvah that the Yom Tovim have to be b'simcha mitzatzem, kuyi b'simcha min ha-Torah. Midaraisa you chayi b'simcha in ha-Torah and Yontif. One of the things seems the Rebbe mentioned it, that the din of simcha nowadays, I used to be karbonis, but in time no b'samigdash, ain't simcha l'bayai, you have to drink wine, and but drinking wine on Yontif, your yaitz the mitzvah simchas Yontif, you have to do it on Chalamed also, because Chalamed is Yontif. Afal Pikein, Kumtas nicht to the Mea Yontev Atzmi. Still, it's not the same as the days of the Yontev itself. Was der Multis is a Yontev Tag with the ganze Shleimus B'chol HaPartim. It's a Yontev day with all the details. A Shleimus dik Yontev. So we see Lechatchila, there's a mitzvah of Yontev, and Yontev has Shleimus, and then there are certain days in the Yontev which is not the Shleimus. It's the same Yontev, but it's missing something, and it's still Yontev. This will explain also the mitzvah of Sfira. This is the Torah says you should count the day after Shabbos, which means the Sfira should start on Sunday. Even though the mitzvah is to count the day after Yontev, whichever day of the week it shall be, is a svail in akvius when Yontev faltus b'yem Shabbos. Because if the kvius is, if the way the Yontev comes out, that it comes out that Sfira starts on the day after Shabbos, that we actually start counting the Sfira on Sunday. It was late Maimer Chazal. This is according, and the Rebbe will bring a raya to it later on. Aggressor Shleimus Neminyan Asfira Kedelakamas Sifhei Baruchim. Sifhei later on is going to explain Arichas that this is a more complete mitzvah of Sfira. Das heißt, it means like this. The mitzvah of Sfira is Melachatchila gegeben geworden zwei Erfahrungen. The mitzvah of Sfira was given by Hashem Melachatchila. We give it in two ways. The Etza mitzvah Sfira was his Ma'ake b'diavad. The mitzvah Sfira itself, which must be, and if you're missing it, you're not Mekayim the mitzvah. Muss sein in jeder Sfira has to be. In was for a kvias is on sein. In any kvias, in any situation, whichever day of the week it comes out, there is something that has to be. Und is to tzeil machas hayontev. You have to count Sfira the day after Yontev. In other words, the second day of Pesach. That's a condition. If it's not the second day of Pesach, that's no good. It's not. You're not Yaitse. So that's a kvias that you could, whichever day of the week it comes out. When I see Farana kvias, Keshachol Pesach V'Yom Shabbos, and then there is a kvias, there is a situation, the establishment of the Yom Tovim, that if Pesach comes out the day after Shabbos, then the mitzvah of Sfira is mitzvah shleimus. So the mitzvah of Sfira is more b'shleimus. That means that there's something special if you count mitzvah, start counting the day of Sfira on Sunday. Then it comes out that the days of the weeks of Sfira is similar, fits to the days of the week. Sunday is the beginning of the week. If the first day of Sfira is on Sunday, that means that's also the beginning of the week. Next week is another week. Again, Sunday is the beginning of the week, and Sunday is the beginning of that week of Sfira. So then there's something shleimus. Was steht in Teinish B'Ksab and Mochas HaShabbos, and that explains why in the Torah it says the word Mochas HaShabbos, Valdos is the mitzvah b'chol shleimus, because the Torah is teaching us that the shleimus of the mitzvah of Sfira is if it comes out on Sunday. That's why it says Mochas HaShabbos. The Raya as Bora B'zeh, and the Raya proof and explaining, because it sounds so far, it still sounds strange. Wow, that Sfira is mainly on, if it comes on a Sunday, we know that's Dukim, they will bring Chazal. And so the Raya and the explanation with Mefashnein from a Medrash to more, a strange Medrash, even Posik is Farta Lachem Mochas HaShabbos. Posik says, count the day after Shabbos, so Zeh Loshna Medrash, just what the Medrash says. Ksiv Shevesh Shabbos et Tmimis Tiyana. It says there should be 7 complete weeks. Ein Messiah Tmimis. When is it that it's the weeks of Tzfira are complete? Zman She'ein Yeshua B'Shchanya B'Neim. a time when the two families of Yeshua and Shchanya did not do the Aveda. We know that there were different mishmaros, different groups, different families did the Aveda, and they changed. So if Svira starts off on a Sunday, so it comes out, according to that quiz, that these two families will not get a chance to work in the Beis Hamikdash between Pesach and Shavuos. Unfortunately, seine Maß bewahrt. Boshim explained this. Das meint, is man Sefer Mochas Shabbos Kepshute Pesuntigon. That this means when is that's what the Chazal the Medrash says. When is Sheva Shabbos is Tmimes? When is the 7 weeks of Sfira complete? When it starts on a Sunday. And the Medrash gives a simon of the Kviyas when Pesach fell to Shabbos, and the Medrash gives a simon. What's the simon to say that it means if Sfira starts on Sunday? Pesach is Shabbos. Hadi Mishmoras Yeshua v'Shchanya nit geton kan aveda b'mikdash when Pesach latzeres. The Mefarshim make the cheshbon according to the families. If they didn't work between Pesach and Shavuos, that means that year Sfira started on Sunday, and that's when it's Tmimes. As man hebt on zählen Sfira b'mitzvah Shabbos, memochas Shabbos kepshute. If you start counting Sfira, what's a Shabbos, which is Sunday, which is the simple pshat memochras haShabbos the day after Shabbos, as heina Shabbos is Tmimes. That these, when is it the weeks of Sfira complete? Tmimis Gans. That's only if it's Kesheshes Mebreshis. If it fits to the days of the week, if the beginning of the week of Sfira fits to the beginning of the week, which is Sunday. Him Yova Yeshua, and if Yeshua and Shchanya do the Aveda during those weeks, Leyu Tmimis. So then that means it doesn't start on Sunday. Then it's not Tmimis. That's what the Medrash says. It's strange. The Chiyuv for Tmimis is b'chol shana v'shana. The Tmimis that the Sfira has to be Tmimis is every year. By Yeder Kviyas. Every Kviyas, whichever way of the week it comes out, there has to be Sheva Shabbos Tmimis. And we learn out certain dinim from that for Tmimis. But the Far Meshochach Lispet Shuvein Mevorach. That's why it says, if you missed one day, you don't make a brocha anymore. Why? Because if you missed one day, it's not Tmimis. Tmimis tells you it has to be complete. Another din Sfira, same as Mebe'erev. Why do we start counting in the evening? Because you want 7 weeks of complete days. So we do darshan the Tmimis for every Sfira, whichever day it comes out. Why does the Medrash say, when is it Tmimis? When it comes out on Shabbos. Nochmer, Kasha is further. This that the Medrash says that when is it complete? If it comes out on a Sunday, gives a place to think that the Baisusim that's looking, these people were right. Asfira hebt sich anständig from Mochas Shabbos. That's what's the mashman. That Sfira always starts on Sunday. That's why it's when is the real Sfira that starts on Sunday. Someone might think that the as we said before. If you have complete weeks like the weeks of the days of the week, of the regular week, he does Tmimis b'shleimus. That's the real complete Tmimis. This shleimus doesn't hold back. In other words, if it's a situation where you don't have the shleimus, it's still good. Tmimis le'kuvis mem tasyem. The fact that you must have, and if you don't have it, you're not kind of mitzvah, is if you don't have full 49 days. Or shleimus and eating not tmimis. When is this tmimis itself? When you do have the 49 days and you do it properly, when is it shleimus? Then says tmimis kesheshes mebreisis pesach chol b'Shabbos. If the 7 weeks of Sfira coincide with the 7 weeks of the 7 days of the week of Sfira coincide with the 7 days of the week, and that is when Pesach comes on the Shabbos and you start counting Sunday. So here we see a concept that there are certain. This is a mitzvah that was given lechatchila. There's a shleimus in the mitzvah David, and if not, you don't have the shleimus. But it's not because you missed something out. The pale you're missing. That year, you don't have the shleimus, but you still have to count Sfira because that's something you must do. In Kenim Advorim, and the Rebbe says, this is true. That the Torah, when it talks about different mitzvahs, it talks about the way the mitzvah is b'shleimus, complete, with all the details. That even if many of the details, you don't have, in other words, if you don't have it, you're still not makiv, means you're still makam the mitzvah. And this explains also something that's strange concerning the end of Sfira, which is Chag HaShavuos. Explains something to Shavuos. We find by Shavuos, in Shavuos itself, we found the same thing. Similar. Then the Kviyas from Chag HaShavuos on Chazal, when which day of the month Shavuos is, the Chazal tell us, Pom B'Chamisha, Pom Meshisha, Pom Meshiva. Sometimes it's the 5th day of Sivan, sometimes the 6th day of Sivan, sometimes the 7th. We know nowadays that we have already a fixed calendar for hundreds and hundreds of 2,000 years almost, fixed calendar, so we know it always comes out the 6th day of Sivan, because we know Shavuos doesn't have a date in the month. Every Yontif has a date. On Pesach it says the 15th of Nisan, Sukkot is the 15th of Tishrei, Kippur is the 10th of Tishrei, Rosh Hashanah is the 1st day of Tishrei. Shavuos doesn't say in the Torah day. All it says is start counting the day after Pesach, and the 50th day from your counting is Shavuos. When is it? So it depends. Not always is the 50th, used to be before they had the set calendar. Not always used to be that Shavuos came out on the 6th day of Sivan. It depends. If one of the month, if Nisan and Iyar, one has 29 days and one has 30 days, then it always comes out, then it's the 6th. And then the 50th day is the 6th of Sivan. If they both have 30 days, then it'll be the 5th of Sivan. If both have only 29 days, then the 50th day, which is Shavuos, will be the 7th day of Sivan. So sometimes like that, sometimes like that. Das heißt, das Chag Shavuos nicht allemal sein, bis manche Makash on Piri, be jemand interessant. That Shavuos doesn't also have to be in the time when they, every month they would have to establish how many days in the month, and because they were Makadosh al Piri, it means they would establish the Chodesh based on witnesses coming that they saw the new moon, etc., etc. But not always did it come out on the day of Matan Torah. Those days was his Beshiva or the Beshiva B'Sivan. Matan Torah is the 6th of Sivan, according to Rabbi Yosef, 7th day of Sivan. But not always was on the 6th of Sivan. According to Rabbi Yosef, not always was on the 7th of Sivan. Sometimes it could have been a different day, a 5th. He's doing it me as there, so we have a kasha here too. When you find as Chazal verbinden them talk for Shavuos, talk for Matan Torah, Chazal comes connect Shavuos to the day of Matan Torah. In other words, the reason that the union of Shavuos is we celebrate Matan Torah. And Matan Torah was on the 6th. Where do we see it? It says in Yerushalmi, the time was by the carbonas from Atzeret, steht nicht in Posig, the Loshen Chet, by the carbonas that we bring Ashur, the special carbonas. It doesn't say in Posig that this is to forgive for a sin, as Avi carbonas from the under Yom Tevim, like by the other Yom Tevim, it mentions in the carbonas that it's to forgive for a sin. The reason is, it says, since this is the day that you accepted upon yourself the yoke of Torah, which is the day of Matan Torah, so I consider as if you never sinned. What do we see from here? Das heißt, Atzeres is verbunden mit dem Tag von Kabbalah Satayra. That Shavuos is connected to the day of Matan Torah. In order 28, the Rebbe actually says that this is a Yerushalmi, but in Bavli, in Psochim Daf Samach Amud Beis, it also says clearly that Atzeres is a day that Torah was given. But why does the Rebbe bring here only from Yerushalmi that Yerushalmi says that the reason it doesn't say Chet is because it's the day of Matan Torah? Because the Rebbe says that in Yerushalmi it says it a source in Torah, that the Torah doesn't mention Chet. And the Bavli, it just says what the Chazal tell us. And then the Rebbe gives another reason, because in Bavli you could say he's not talking about the time when they were Mekadosh al Piyariya, where every year it could be a different case. It's talking in a case the way it's now, that we know it's always going to be Beshisha. But in Yerushalmi, it's talking about the Karbonis, so it's obviously talking about the time when they were Mekadosh al Piyariya. And even then, it says that Shavuos is connected to Matan Torah. That's why it doesn't say in the Torah by Shavuos, but the Karbonis Chet. So the question is, if Shavuos is because of Matan Torah, then it should be on the day of Shisha B'Sivan. But sometimes it's not on the day. So how does it make sense? If it comes out, hey, it's not Shisha B'Sivan, not even according to Rabbi Yosef, B'Shvi B'Sivan, comes out B'Shvi, according to Rabbanan, which is B'Shish, it doesn't come out the day. So what's the pshat that we have a yontif of Matan Torah, and it doesn't come out the day the Torah was given? Is there beer? The explanation is that Teichen for mitzvah Sfira same it is Kabbalah Satayra. The whole purpose of the mitzvah counting the days Sfira is as a preparation to Kabbalah Satayra. To avoid Rishonim b'Shem HaMedrash, says in the Rishonim, the name of a Medrash, Amas at the grace of the Wartung Geschuke von Iten zu Kabbalah Satayra, haben sie herausgehen, die von Mitzrayim gezählt, mit Mifel Tekes, mit geworden Ente zu Kabbalah Satayra. It says in the Medrash, the Rishonim bring that when Eden heard that they're going to receive the Torah when they go out of Mitzrayim, they were longing. They had the chukka, the desire. They couldn't wait. So they counted days. That's something you wait for, something very special. You wait for it, you count the days. They counted the days. So the Eibishter said, since you counted the days from when you went out of Mitzrayim till Matan Torah, I'm giving you a mitzvah as a reward. That every year count the days from Pesach to Shavuos. Counting the days from Yitzias Mitzrayim, going out of Mitzrayim to Matan Torah. So it comes out that the Memtes from Sfira is in the Achonetz and Matan Torah. So the 49 days of Sfira is a preparation, counting, preparing to Matan Torah, which is Yom HaChamishim, which is the 50th day. That's when Matan Torah is, but Shavuos is. B'loshen Chassidus, if you want to use the Chassidus expression, the Sfira from Memtes Yem, connected the Memtes Shari Bina, it says there are 49 gates of Bina, and that Eden could reach. Person could reach, but every day you go higher and higher. But the 50th, that's a level that you can't reach. But if you reach the 49, the Eibishter gives you the 50th. So counting the 49th of Sfira is basically every day going higher and higher in Aveda. It says going higher and higher, 49 levels. And through the Sfira of the 49 days, which is connected the 49 levels, the you reach then, the Eibishter gives you the 50th gate, and this is the Inyan of Matan Torah. So it fits even more to what we said before, that the 49 days of Sfira is the preparation of Matan Torah, of Shavuos, of Matan Torah. It comes out as Afapi, the Inyan of Sfira is Nikiv geworden and Eifen. Even though counting Sfira is established in such a way, established as in the mitzvah, in such a way, that the Yom HaChamishim muss nicht falling down talk from Kabbalah Satira, that the 50th, which is the Inyan of Matan Torah, as we said before, the 50th is Matan Torah, but it's not always is the 50th day of Matan Torah. Noch mehr, can sein lifting Kabbalah Satira. Not only sometimes it's after, it could be 7th, which is after Matan Torah. Sometimes it could come out the 5th. So it means you reach the Shara HaChamishim before the day the Torah was given. But if it's connected to the Torah was given, how could it come out on the 5th? Von deswegen, when Atzeres Yom HaChamisha fart Yelis in them talking Kabbalah Satira. So the truth is, you could reach that 50th level, not actually the day of Kabbalah Satira. Nevertheless, when it does come out in the day of Kabbalah Satira, it's not like a side thing. So it happens to be, interesting thing. It comes out on the same day. No, a shleimus in Atzeres Gufer. That's a shleimus in what Shavuos represents. The shleimus for Yom HaChamishim is, when is the Yom HaChamishim, like you reach through the 49 days, you reach the 50th, that is when this is the talk from Kebaltem Alechem El Teira Matan Teira. If it comes out that the 50th is the Matan Teira, it's more shleimus. It's more shleimus. So we see here by Shavuos itself that there is the way it is b'shleimus, and that's all based on the Torah. The Torah made it that sometimes it comes out on the 6th, and now it always does, but it used to be sometimes on the 6th, and then it fit mamish l'chatchila that the 49 days you prepare the Matan Torah, and the 50th day is the day of Shavuos, which is the day we celebrate Matan Torah. But it could also be sometimes that the way the Kviyas is Al Torah, that it doesn't come out on that same day. The Baldas Atzeres b'Shleimus is when it says Chal, the talk from Kabbalah Satira, and since the Shleimus of Matan Torah is when it comes out, the Shleimus of Chamishim is when it comes out the day Matan Torah, then he was the Yerushalmi steht nicht in Torah Shebeksav it says the Lashon Chet. So Yerushalmi says that in Matan Torah by Atzeres by Shavuos it doesn't say the Lashon Chet, even, and the reason is because that's the day of Matan Torah. You accepted the Torah says no Chet. And we say that even if it didn't come out on the day of Matan Torah, because it's the same mitzvah. And that year it's not b'shleimus. So the same thing is b'negeya. We're going to say svira. Kishem b'dos is b'negeya. It's ein und derselbe mitzvah. Just like we said, concerning the same mitzvah, you could have two ways. Al der ze gefindt man in zwei besondere mitzvah toch not techem shove. We find the same thing in two separate mitzvahs which have the same Teichen, the same meaning. As in a mitzvah is the Teichen a mitzvah b'shleimus, but the zweite mitzvah does not b'shleimus. They're both two mitzvahs which seemingly have something in common, and by one of them, the established mitzvah was that Teichen, that common denominator is more b'shleimus, and the same mitzvah, the other mitzvah which has the same thing is not b'shleimus. L'dugma. There's a good example, interesting example. Schiras Yitzias Mitzrayim, you have to remember going out of Mitzrayim. But by Shteit for zwei besondere mitzvah, there are two separate mitzvahs there. One mitzvah is the Chiv L'Saper B'Tzias Mitzrayim B'Leil Tesvav B'Nisan, to the mitzvah to tell Yitzias, speak about Yitzias Mitzrayim the night of the 15th of Nisan, which is the Seder night, the night of Pesach. And then every day of the year, there's a mitzvah to remember Yitzias Mitzrayim. The Alpha Pei Abeid have themselves taken, even though they both have the same contents. Both are a mitzvah, remember Yitzias Mitzrayim. There are many differences in how you fulfill the mitzvah. The Schira b'Meshech Kol HaShana Kula is nicht mit alle Protim. When you remember Yitzias a whole year, every day of the year, you don't have to remember it with all the details. And it's not in a stressed way. Not the same way as remembering Yitzias. There are a lot of details and it's much stronger, but it's basically the same mitzvah. The Tamadover is moving b'pashtus. What's the reason why Taka? Only Pesach night you have to remember with all the details, etc., and all year round not. So the reason is simple. There's man for Yitzias Mitzrayim keep shooting is B'leil Tezvav Nisan. The time when Yidden went on Mitzrayim was the 15th day of Nisan. And the Rebbe is the Schiras Yitzias Mitzrayim B'layla Zein an Neifim from Tachel Hashleimus. So to remember Yitzias Mitzrayim has to be B'Shleimus. That night, that's the real time. So then you're Makayim the mitzvah B'Shleimus. Mashenk and the Chiv Yitzias Mitzrayim Meshkal Hashana Kula. But this that you have to remember, Yitzias Mitzrayim, a whole year is not a tetzorah from the Chiv of Pesach. It's a result of what the Chiv of the night of Pesach. Because there is the night of Pesach when you have to read Yitzias Mitzrayim, that's why you have to remember every day. And the Rebbe explains it. Since the union of Yitzias Mitzrayim, the fact that Yidden went on the Mitzrayim, is not something that happened once. It happened once, but that continues rehappening. That's what the Rebbe explains it in many siches. Was the father's achiv Yitzias Mitzrayim b'meshech kol hashon kula. That's why all of the whole year you have to remember Yitzias Mitzrayim, because it's not a one-time thing. It's like it says, b'chol day v'day you have to remember Yitzias Mitzrayim every generation. The Alter Rebbe says in Tanya b'chol yom v'yom every day you have to remember Yitzias Mitzrayim. Why? It's the Yitzias Mitzrayim that happened once, but that continues happening, but it's not the same level as the night when it happened. It made it verstandig, so we understand that this schira is not mit as shleimus with the schira from Lil Pesach. This remembering a whole year is not the same shleimus as you meant Pesach night. So here we see an interesting thing, that another example, before we give an example in the same mitzvah, two situations. Now an example in two mitzvahs, but they have the same minyan, and one is more b'shleimus of the same minyan. And that's the chatchil how the mitzvah was given, that during the year you don't have it b'shleimus. A main dugma now need bin yishal mitzvah as an example, not concerning a mitzvah. You find in a mishnah, in a mishnah, which at first glance it seems strange. Steht in a mishnah. It says in the mishnah in Shkolim, beginning of Perek Hey. There were different people. They had jobs in the Beis Hamikdash. They were appointed on taking care, overlooking different things. When the mishnah rechnet is a name from the Memunim, and the mishnah mentions the names of the people who had these jobs. When the Vosfar and Aveda binyan Hamikdash is yeder for they give him, and on which Aveda, which job in the Beis Hamikdash, each one was appointed. And he said, Yechanan ben Pincha was appointed al Chesmas, he was appointed on the seals, etc., etc. It gives the different names. And the Meforshim bring in Tzvei Perushim. Now, what do we mean that? What's the reason they gave the names? So there's two opinions what that means. One opinion is Kishere Kolder V'dei Bolimnes. That what it means is they were not all in the same generation. He just picked of all generations the best people. So in what Yechanan ben Pinchas, out of all the years when you had somebody on the Chesmes, he was the best, so he picked his name. Then you had Mordechai, who was on a different thing. It's a different generation, so he's just picking out from all the generations the best. Another pshat is Misha Hoye Beis Hadei Mona Mashabadei, the one that wrote the Mishnah. That generation, he wrote whoever was at that time Memuna appointed on the different things. It's strange. In Mishnah, what's the purpose to mention in the Mishnah, which the purpose of the Mishnah is tell halacha, the names of the people who were appointed generations ago. Like the Gemara says sometimes, when the Gemara speaks about something that happened, sometimes the Gemara asks, if it's not negayah to us for halacha, whatever it was, what is important for us to tell? History is one thing. The Mishnah is not a sefer history. So it's not for history. So why do we have to know the names of the people? Whichever way, according to this picture, whether it mentions one of different each one is a different generation, or they're one generation. But what's the purpose? That Nastashtain, that Pirish Harav will understand this by another pshat. The pshat that the Bartanura says, that these names were given to the first people who were appointed on these different jobs. So people in the later generations who had the same job were called by that name. In other words, that name was given later on to every later person in that job. So everybody, all generations that were on the Chesmes were called Yechanan. Maybe Yechanan ben Pinchas, I don't know exactly how far it went. And the same thing with other things. So this name stayed and it continued later on. So what's the pshat? So why did they call the later generations the ones that had this job had the same name. They gave the name of the one that had the job in the beginning. The pshat could be like this. Every name expresses the nature, the nature of the person who carries that name. Like it says, the Chazal tell us, Reb Meir would be medayik, look at a person's name, and from that he could tell people things. So Reb Meir was medayik in the names. So the name represents what the person is. Applying this to what we're saying, here. This is the reason that they picked these specific people to be appointed on these specific things in the Beis Hamikdash is because these inyonim that we're talking about, these different things, require that the person in charge should have certain tchunas, certain natures, and these natures is hinted in their names. In other words, the name represents the nature of the person that fits to that job. So therefore, every generation, we have to appoint a new person on that same thing. So we have to find a person that fits to that name, because that name represents the nature that this fits to this job. So every generation, we'll be looking for a person who could have that name. But the fact that when you found another person who took over, he originally had another name. But after they got the job, then they gave him that name. From that we understand the fact that they didn't really have that name originally means that even though they were people who were fit to that job, that's why they were given later that name, but originally it wasn't the same as the first person, because the first person, that was his real name. But it shows that he had the tchunas v'horai, they gave him that name, but the fact that another name shows that it was only a little bit of that tchun of that nature. But not completely that they had this nature like the original ones, because the original one had that name lechatchila. So here we see again, we wanted the people on this job to have, but it was like a b'diavad. The ones originally had it completely, the ones later, same thing, and they appointed them, but they were not exactly the same. So now let's get back to the beginning of the sikha. The way we explained before by Yeschiras Mitzrayim, that you have the way it's B'Shleimush, which is Pesach night. Then you have the same mitzvah. It's a different mitzvah, but the same concept of a mitzvah. That's a whole year, which is not so much B'Shleimus the Inyan. The same thing is Al Der Hazeh Debir and Divir Hazeh Ben Geit Shon Hashviz. This will explain the Zayar concerning the 7th year of the Evet, which we said in the beginning, the Sikha, that seems from Zayar that the Evet would go out in the year of Shemitah, when it's not true. The Evet would go out the 7th year from when it was sold. Doesn't depend on the title, the year of the cycle of Shemitah. So the Rebbe explains like this. I said, we know the 7th year, which has a certain inyan, and that's the year of Shemitah, and then you have the 7th year of an individual. The 7th year from when the person, the Evet, was sold, that's his 7th year. That's his own, and that's the way it goes. He goes out on that 7th year. The bald as beide sein in an inyan from Shvius, since both have an inyan of the 7th, they both have something in common. The common denominator, they both have to, the earth has to rest on the 7th year, and he goes out on his 7th year, but they're both concept of 7, so there's something in common. Certainly this example is of the Yochad Atil from Klal Yisrael. Every individual is part of Klal Yisrael, and there's a Klal Yisrael 7th, and there's his individual 7th. The difference is like this. By the Shon Hashviz from Klal Yisrael, the 7th year of everybody, which means the year of Shemitah, is the Teichen B'Shabbos L'Hashem B'Shleimus. It's a year when it's resting to Hashem, complete B'Shleimus. The Rebbe brings him mit sich die alle halachas from Shemitah. So that's why it brings along all the halachas of Shemitah. There's something the 7th year. That's the real 7th year, which represents certain special inyonim, and that brings about certain halachas of Shemitah. Shenk in the Shon Hashviz from a Yochid, but the 7th year from an individual, he's blaze Ama'ain from them Shabbos L'Hashem for Shnas HaShemitah. It's only a miniature. It's only a little bit. Ma'ain, we call it, similar, a little bit, not B'Shleimus, of the 7th year of Shemitah. So that 7th year is only connected to one thing. It's the same idea of 7th, but not in all other dini, but only in the fact that he goes out free. So it's his 7th year, but Itaka goes out his 7th year. It has a similarity to Shemitah. Shemitah is a 7th, and it has certain dinim. This is also a seventh, also has, but one din, the din that he goes out free. One does out there Zayah. Now that we understand, this is what the Zayah is. The Zayah says, that with that resting of the land, the Eved has a resting, meaning like this. The Eved certainly has to go out this for free on the 7th year from when he was sold. But there is a chelik from Klal, because he's part of the Klal. And he has part of what Shemitah is by the field. In his 7th year, he has a miniature of what the 7th year is for Klal Yisrael. A me'ein from the Shvis from Klal Yisrael. So me'ein, a miniature, a little bit of the Shvis of Klal Yisrael. There it makes the resting of the field. So this is similar to that. So it's not this just the teretz is that what does the Zayar? The Zayar means not that he goes out on Shemitah. The Zayar means that it has in his year Shemitah, in his 7th year, I mean, he has a miniature, a little bit of what there is in the Shemitah. Now, based on what we said before, will come out something new. And the Rebbe said, you have to look in this for him if this taka is true. That what? If it happens to be that the 7th year of the Evet, from when he was sold, happens to be also on Shemitah, coincides with Shemitah, Tutuv Shemitah, Naichadare, so Shemitah, which is the rest for the field, the Klolas Dika, the general Shemitah for Klal Yisrael, accomplishes a Zayin who's going to Chav She'av the Naichad, that his going out free, which is the resting of the Eved, so Zayin Betachas HaShlemus, should be B'Shlemus. So just like you said before, there's Lachatchilim B'di Eved, there's B'Shlemus, not, same thing here. That's what Zayar means, that you go out the 7th year of Shemitah, yes, because the real thing of going out of the Eved on the 7th year would be the best if it happens to be Shemitah. Because his 7th year is a miniature of Shemitah. And if it comes out, Mamash Shemitah is the best. The pale, he goes out whenever it's the 7th year of him. But that's what the Zayar means. So it's, first of all, it means that it's similar to that, but it's not only similar, actually, just like by Svira, if it comes out on a Sunday, that's the Shlemus, even though you don't have to. If it doesn't come on a Sunday, the mitzvah is there, but it's not so Shlemus. Same thing by David. If he goes out on Shemitah, it's Shlemus. But the Rebbe said, it's but you have to look in is there any difference? In other words, is there a difference that if the Shemitah, if the 7th year of the Evet comes on the Shemitah, is there something lahalocha more? It's more shleimus. It's ruchnius. I'm not going into here. You have to look into it. Is there something different in halacha if the Evet's 7th year happens to be in Shemitah? But it's definitely more b'shleimus. Now, what is it negated to? That the Rebbe says you have to think about it. Now we'll understand the big ishmak. What the Zayar says in a straight that on this resting of the field, the Evet has rest. For welches is mashma, the Zayr wegen Shnas Shmita Kipshute. It seems like the Zayr is talking, Pasha the year of Shmita, that year of Shmita when the field rests, that's the year when the Evet goes out. Now we understand, while the Zayr bring the fall from Shviz, by Shviz, Yetzelach of Shechinam, Vier is Bishleimus. Because the Zayr brings away the real Shleimus, because we said before, since there's the same minion, but the Shleimus is Shemitah, so if it comes out that he goes out his 7th year in Shemitah, that's more b'shleim. That's what the Zayar means. Al derech hanal, like we said before, the Torah zogt es vart am Chemach Shabbos. The Torah says you should count the day after Shabbos. Why? Their fire was does their fall when the mitzvah from Sfira b'shleimus. That's the case when Sfira is complete. The same thing here also. That why does the Zayar say that he goes on the Shemitah? Because that's the real way, the complete way. But this is Mishvis, the Mechira, by the Eved, is Nashnas Shemitah. When is it complete? When the Eved goes out on Shemitah, and then it's Bahon Aichadar. Then it's actually the same resting as the field, which is the Shemitah, is also by him, the Shemitah. But it doesn't mean that he only goes out if it's a Shemitah. He goes out always. So it's not so Bishlemus. And the Rebbe Nora 44, like he mentions again, that by Sfira Seimer, we say Tmimis. When is Emes Tmimis? When is it Tmimis? When it comes out on Shabbos, Pesach, which means that Sfira is Sunday. Chag HaShavuos, Kasher Atzeres Chol B'Shisha B'Sivan. Shavuos comes out the 6th of Sivan, that's the Shleimus. Then there's the Shleimus. Same thing here. When is the Shleimus of the Evet going out free on his 7th year, if it actually has to come out, happens to come out in the year of Shemitah?